They called me delusional when I said I would build a music empire from our garage, but when my 10-year-old son stood up at their anniversary party and asked if he should play the recording his father left behind, their laughter died faster than their respect for what I had become. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal chandelier in my sister-in-law's dining room cast prismatic rainbows across the mahogany table where 15 members of the Morrison family sat in their Sunday finest, their voices rising and falling in the comfortable cadence of people who had never questioned their place in the world. The scent of roasted lamb and rosemary filled the air, mingling with the sound of clinking silverware and satisfied conversation about real estate investments, golf handicaps, and vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard. I sat at the far end of the table, my 8-year-old son Marcus pressed close against my side, both of us occupying the physical and social periphery of this monthly family gathering. My simple black dress, purchased from a department store clearance rack, stood in stark contrast to the designer clothing that adorned the other women present. The gold jewelry that gleamed from their wrists and throats represented more money than I earned in 6 months working double shifts at the diner while pursuing my impossible dream. "Elena, you really should consider something more practical," my mother-in-law Patricia announced from her position at the head of the table, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dispensing wisdom whether requested or not. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, her makeup applied with the precision of someone who understood that appearances were a form of currency in her social circle. "This music production fantasy has gone on long enough. Marcus needs stability, not pipe dreams." The word struck with the familiar sting of judgment wrapped in concern, a technique Patricia had perfected during the 3 years since my husband David died in a construction accident, leaving Marcus and me to navigate the world without the buffer of his presence. David had been the bridge between his family's conventional expectations and my unconventional ambitions, the translator who helped them understand why I spent my nights hunched over recording equipment in our converted garage instead of pursuing what they considered appropriate widow behavior. "She has been saying she will make it big for years now," added my brother-in-law Christopher, his voice carrying the patronizing tone reserved for discussing children's career aspirations. Christopher managed a regional bank branch and wore his financial success like armor, constantly referencing mortgage rates and investment portfolios as proof of his superior life choices. At some point, reality needs to set in. The music industry is not exactly known for welcoming middle-aged single mothers from suburban Connecticut. The assembled family members nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting the kind of sympathetic concern that felt more like pity than support. These monthly gatherings had become exercises in endurance, opportunities for David's relatives to express their collective worry about my financial decisions and parenting choices while maintaining the pretense of family unity. They spoke about me as though I were not present, discussing my future with a detached analysis typically reserved for problem-solving rather than personal conversation. "I have been thinking," Patricia continued, cutting her lamb with surgical precision, "that perhaps it would be beneficial for Marcus to spend more time here during the week. Christopher and Jennifer have mentioned they would be happy to help with homework supervision and extracurricular activities. It would provide him with more stability while Elena sorts through her priorities." The suggestion landed like a physical blow, though I fought to keep my expression neutral. The implication was clear. They considered me an inadequate guardian whose artistic pursuits compromised my ability to provide proper care for my son. Marcus stiffened beside me, his small hand finding mine under the table and squeezing with surprising strength. He understood the subtext even at his young age, recognizing the challenge to our small but fiercely independent family unit. "Mom is teaching me about music production," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible above the ambient conversation. "She showed me how to use the mixing board and how to layer different instruments to create harmony. Did you know that most popular songs use the same 4-chord progressions, but you can make them sound completely different by changing the arrangement and instrumentation?" His words created a momentary silence, the kind that occurs when adults are reminded that children absorb more than they reveal. Patricia's expression softened slightly, though her fundamental position remained unchanged. She reached across the table to pat Marcus's hand with the gentle condescension typically reserved for explaining why dreams must yield to practical concerns. "That sounds very interesting, sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying the tone used for humoring childhood fantasies. But music is a wonderful hobby, not a career foundation. Your mother needs to focus on building a stable future for both of you, which means pursuing opportunities with reliable income and benefits. Perhaps she could consider returning to school for nursing or teaching, something that would provide security and respect in the community. The suggestion revealed the depth of their misunderstanding about both my capabilities and my commitment to the path I had chosen. They saw my music production work as an expensive hobby, a creative outlet that indulged my emotional needs while neglecting practical responsibilities. They could not comprehend that the equipment in our garage represented 3 years of methodical learning, strategic investment, and developing expertise that was beginning to attract attention from artists who valued substance over conventional credentials. I actually have several projects in development, I said, attempting to inject pride into my voice while maintaining the diplomatic tone these gatherings required. I recently completed production work for an independent artist whose album is being considered by major labels. The advance payments have been modest, but the exposure could lead to more significant opportunities. Christopher laughed, a sound devoid of humor or encouragement. Elena, independent artists and major label consideration are code words for unpaid work and unrealistic expectations. I see the financial reality of creative industries through my business clients. The success rate is abysmal, and the few people who make substantial income are typically those with family money or industry connections that provide safety nets during the inevitable lean years. His analysis stung because it contained elements of truth that I confronted daily. The music industry was indeed challenging for newcomers, particularly those without inherited advantages or established networks. I had been operating on minimal resources, learning through trial and error while supporting Marcus through service industry work that left little time for advancing my production skills. The path I had chosen was statistically improbable, financially precarious, and emotionally exhausting. But Christopher's assessment ignored the progress I had achieved through determination and natural ability. Artists were beginning to seek my services because my productions captured emotional authenticity that escaped more technically polished but creatively sterile approaches. I possessed an intuitive understanding of how different musical elements could combine to create emotional resonance, a skill that could not be taught in traditional academic settings or purchased through expensive equipment alone. The recording I completed last month has generated significant interest from A&R representatives, I continued, despite the skeptical expressions surrounding me. The artist has been invited to showcase performances in Nashville and Los Angeles, with her album potentially being released through a distribution deal that could reach national audiences. And how much income has this generated for your household? Patricia asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer would fail to justify the time and energy invested. Marcus needs consistent support for school activities, healthcare, and college preparation. These industry connections and potential opportunities do not pay for groceries or piano lessons. The question exposed the central tension between artistic ambition and practical survival that dominated my daily existence. The production work generated modest income that supplemented my diner wages, but the financial returns remained insufficient to support independent living without the constant pressure of multiple income sources. I was reinvesting most earnings into better equipment and marketing efforts, gambling on future success while struggling to meet immediate needs. Marcus squeezed my hand again, this time with a different quality of pressure that suggested support rather than seeking comfort. When I looked down at him, his dark eyes held a determination that reminded me powerfully of his father's expression during moments when David faced challenges that others considered insurmountable. Marcus had inherited more than physical features from his father. He possessed the same quiet confidence that refused to accept other people's limitations as definitive. "Dad always said Mom was going to be famous someday," Marcus announced to the table, his young voice carrying conviction that silenced the adult conversation. He recorded something before he died that he wanted people to hear if they ever doubted her talent. He made me promise to keep it safe until the right moment. The revelation struck the dining room like lightning, creating an electric silence that seemed to charge the air around us. David had never mentioned any recording to me, though he had been supportive of my musical ambitions in ways that sometimes surprised me with their depth and specificity. He possessed an intuitive understanding of artistic vision despite his own career in construction, often providing insights about my work that proved remarkably astute. Patricia's expression shifted through confusion, curiosity, and something approaching concern. The family had idealized David's memory in ways that sometimes felt suffocating, transforming him into a symbol of practical wisdom and family devotion that implicitly criticized my unconventional choices. The suggestion that he had endorsed my musical pursuits through some kind of recorded message challenged their narrative about what he would have wanted for Marcus and me. "What kind of recording, sweetheart?" Jennifer asked gently, her voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the judgment that had characterized most of the evening's conversation. Jennifer had always been the most sympathetic family member, though her support rarely extended beyond private conversations and subtle gestures of encouragement. Marcus looked at me with a question in his eyes, seeking permission to share information that belonged to both of us. I nodded slightly, curious about this revelation but trusting his judgment about the appropriate moment for disclosure. He had demonstrated remarkable maturity in navigating the complex dynamics of family relationships, often understanding adult motivations with clarity that sometimes unsettled me. "It's a recording of him talking about Mom's music," Marcus explained, his voice growing stronger as he continued. "He made it during one of her late-night sessions in the garage, when she was working on the song that made her cry because it reminded her of their wedding. He said someday people would need to understand that she was never chasing fantasies, she was chasing excellence." The words created a profound shift in the room's emotional atmosphere. David's voice, even filtered through our son's memory, carried authority that the assembled family could not easily dismiss. He had been their golden boy, the practical son who built houses and maintained stability while pursuing reasonable ambitions within acceptable boundaries. His endorsement of my work carried weight that my own achievements could not yet command. Patricia's carefully maintained composure showed the first signs of uncertainty I had witnessed during 3 years of monthly family gatherings. She glanced around the table as though seeking consensus about how to respond to this unexpected development, but found only expressions of curiosity and growing discomfort among her allies. The foundation of their collective certainty about my misguided priorities had developed an unexpected crack. "I think," Marcus continued with the devastating honesty that only children possess, "that Dad would want me to play it now, so everyone could hear what he really thought about Mom's music instead of just guessing what he would say." The challenge hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle, impossible to ignore and potentially explosive in its implications. Marcus had offered to provide evidence that could either validate their concerns about my impractical choices or fundamentally alter their understanding of what David had believed about my potential. The recording represented a voice from beyond that could settle questions they had been debating without definitive answers. I felt the weight of 15 pairs of eyes studying my reaction, searching for signs of whether I welcomed this unexpected revelation or feared its potential consequences. The truth was that I experienced both emotions simultaneously, grateful for David's apparent support while terrified that the recording might not live up to Marcus's confident description. Family mythology often transformed simple statements into profound declarations through the alchemy of grief and hope. "Perhaps," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest, "that conversation should happen another time, when people are prepared to listen without the distraction of dinner and celebration." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But even as I offered the family an escape from this moment of potential truth, I could see in their expressions that the seed had been planted. Marcus had introduced evidence that could not be ignored indefinitely, a recording that promised to reveal David's authentic thoughts about my musical ambitions rather than their assumptions about what he would have supported. The evening had shifted from their comfortable criticism of my choices to the possibility that they had fundamentally misunderstood what David himself had believed about my potential. The chandelier continued casting its rainbow patterns across the mahogany table, but the light now illuminated a family gathering where certainty had been replaced by curiosity, and where a 10-year-old boy's simple question had transformed comfortable assumptions into uncomfortable possibilities that would demand resolution. The laughter that had filled the room earlier when they dismissed my dreams now seemed premature, potentially embarrassing if David's voice revealed that he had seen something in my work that they had failed to recognize. Marcus sat beside me with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had successfully redirected a conversation toward truth, while I faced the realization that our family dynamics were about to change in ways that none of us could fully predict. Growing up in the small industrial town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, I learned early that there were two types of families: those who accepted their circumstances as permanent fixtures of life, and those who whispered about possibilities that existed beyond the factory smokestacks and row houses that defined our community's horizon. My family belonged firmly to the first category, viewing ambition with the same suspicion typically reserved for strangers bearing expensive gifts or politicians making campaign promises. The Castellanos had lived in Millbrook for 3 generations, each one working variations of the same jobs at the textile mill that employed nearly half the town's population. My grandfather operated industrial looms for 47 years until arthritis forced his retirement. My father supervised quality control for fabric production, a position he considered the pinnacle of working-class achievement because it involved wearing a tie and carrying a clipboard rather than standing at machinery for 8-hour shifts. Our house sat in the middle of a block where every structure looked virtually identical, differentiated only by the colors of their aluminum siding and the condition of their small front yards. The Castellano home was distinguished by my mother's obsessive attention to landscaping and the plastic covers she maintained over the living room furniture to preserve its appearance for special occasions that never seemed to arrive. Everything about our domestic environment emphasized preservation over expression, maintaining appearances over exploring possibilities. Music entered my life through the basement radio my father listened to during his weekend carpentry projects. He preferred classic rock stations that played the same rotation of songs from the 1970s and 1980s, creating a soundtrack of familiar melodies that provided background rhythm to his methodical work with wood and tools. I would sit on the basement stairs, ostensibly helping by holding nails or fetching equipment, but actually absorbing the complex layering of instruments and vocals that created emotional landscapes far more expansive than anything visible from our neighborhood streets. The moment I understood music as something more than entertainment occurred during a thunderstorm when I was 11 years old. Lightning had knocked out the electricity throughout our block, leaving families to navigate evening routines by candlelight and battery-powered devices. My father's radio continued playing on its backup power, and in the unusual quiet created by the absence of televisions and appliances, I heard details in familiar songs that had escaped my previous attention. The guitar solo in Comfortably Numb revealed itself as a conversation between despair and hope, each note carrying emotional weight that connected to feelings I could not yet articulate. The layered harmonies in Bohemian Rhapsody demonstrated how multiple voices could create meaning greater than their individual contributions. Most significantly, I recognized that someone had made deliberate choices about every element I was hearing, from the placement of drums in the mix to the subtle use of reverb that created spatial depth. That night, by candlelight in our powerless house, I experienced what can only be described as a calling. Music was not simply entertainment or background noise, but a language capable of communicating emotions and ideas that conventional words could not express. Someone, somewhere, was responsible for crafting these sonic experiences that could transport listeners from their immediate circumstances to internal landscapes of infinite possibility. My parents interpreted my growing musical interest as a typical childhood phase that would naturally resolve itself as I matured and confronted practical realities. They purchased an inexpensive keyboard for Christmas, viewing it as harmless entertainment that might teach discipline and provide social opportunities through school band participation. They could not have anticipated that the instrument would become my primary means of exploring the world beyond Millbrook's limitations. Teaching myself to play required developing patience and persistence that school had never demanded. Academic subjects presented information to be memorized and regurgitated, but music required understanding relationships between elements that could be combined in infinite variations. Each chord progression opened new possibilities for melodic exploration. Every rhythm pattern suggested different emotional contexts that could be enhanced through harmony and arrangement choices. The high school music program provided my first exposure to formal musical education, though the curriculum focused primarily on classical traditions and marching band repertoire that felt disconnected from the contemporary music that captured my imagination. Mr. Henderson, the band director, was a competent musician who emphasized technical precision and adherence to established conventions, but he showed little interest in the creative possibilities that had attracted me to music originally. During my sophomore year, I discovered that our school's audiovisual department possessed a modest recording setup that students could access for video production assignments. The equipment was outdated and limited, but it included a 4-track recorder and basic mixing capabilities that allowed me to experiment with layering different instrumental parts. My first multi-track recording was a crude reproduction of a Beatles song, but the process of building complex arrangements from individual components felt like discovering a new form of language. Word of my recording experiments reached Mr. Henderson, who expressed concern about students using school equipment for unauthorized projects. He suggested that I channel my technical interests toward traditional music education, perhaps pursuing classical piano training that would provide proper foundation for any future musical activities. His advice reflected the conventional wisdom that musical success required formal training and adherence to established pathways, but it ignored the creative satisfaction I derived from exploration and experimentation. The tension between conventional musical education and my intuitive approach to production became more pronounced during my junior year, when I began creating original compositions rather than reproducing existing songs. My pieces incorporated elements from different genres, combining rock instrumentation with jazz harmonies and electronic effects that created sounds I had never heard before. The music felt authentic and personal, but it defied categorization in ways that made teachers and classmates uncomfortable. My parents viewed my increasing dedication to music production with growing concern about its impact on my preparation for practical career pursuits. They expected me to pursue college education that would lead to stable employment in fields like teaching, nursing, or business administration. Creative pursuits were acceptable as hobbies or supplementary activities, but they could not serve as foundations for responsible adult life in communities like Millbrook. The conflict reached its peak during my senior year when I announced my intention to study music production at a specialized audio engineering school rather than pursuing a traditional college degree. The program would provide technical training in recording techniques and industry practices, but it offered no guarantee of employment and required significant financial investment with uncertain returns. My parents viewed this choice as evidence that I had lost perspective about my realistic options and responsibilities. "Elena, you need to understand that creative careers are luxuries for people with safety nets," my mother explained during one of our many conversations about post-graduation plans. "Artists and musicians come from families with money, connections, and backup plans. Working-class kids like us cannot afford to chase dreams that do not pay bills or provide benefits. You have been blessed with intelligence and opportunities that most people in this town would give anything to have. Do not waste them on fantasies." Her perspective reflected the practical wisdom that had sustained our family through multiple economic recessions and industrial changes that had devastated many of our neighbors. Millbrook's history was filled with young people who had pursued ambitious plans only to return home disappointed and financially depleted, eventually settling into the same patterns their parents had followed. The textile mill provided steady employment with predictable advancement opportunities for people willing to accept its limitations and requirements. But my mother's advice, while well-intentioned, failed to acknowledge the creative fire that had been burning inside me since that night listening to music by candlelight during the power outage. I could not imagine finding satisfaction in work that utilized only a fraction of my capabilities or that failed to engage the part of my personality that thrived on artistic expression and technical innovation. The thought of spending decades in conventional employment while suppressing my musical ambitions felt like a form of death in life. My father approached the situation with characteristic directness, focusing on financial realities rather than emotional considerations. He calculated the costs of audio engineering school against average industry earnings, demonstrating that the mathematics favored traditional career paths by substantial margins. Even successful music producers typically experienced irregular income patterns that made long-term financial planning difficult, while careers in education or healthcare provided steady advancement opportunities and retirement security. "I understand that you enjoy music," he said during one of our garage workshop sessions, his hands continuing to shape wood while addressing my future with the same methodical precision he applied to carpentry projects. "But enjoyment and career viability are different things entirely. The people who make money in music are typically performers or business executives, not the technical workers behind the scenes. You would be better served developing skills that guarantee employment rather than gambling on an industry that discards people as soon as younger, cheaper alternatives become available. His analysis contained elements of truth that I could not entirely dismiss. The music industry was indeed challenging for newcomers, particularly those without family connections or independent financial resources. Technical positions in recording studios often required unpaid internships and entry-level work that barely covered living expenses, while establishing an independent production business demanded entrepreneurial skills and marketing capabilities that formal education did not typically provide. However, my father's assessment overlooked the transformative potential of emerging technologies that were democratizing music production and distribution. Digital recording software was making professional quality production accessible to individuals with modest budgets, while internet platforms were creating new opportunities for independent artists to reach audiences without traditional industry gatekeepers. The landscape was changing in ways that favored creative entrepreneurs willing to learn new technologies and develop direct relationships with artists. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, attempted to broker a compromise between my artistic ambitions and my parents' practical concerns. She suggested pursuing a business degree with emphasis on arts management or communication, providing foundation skills that could be applied in creative industries while maintaining flexibility for other career options. The approach would satisfy my parents' requirement for conventional education while allowing me to remain connected to musical environments. The compromise proposal felt like a betrayal of the creative vision that had sustained me through 4 years of high school in a community that offered few outlets for artistic expression. Business courses would teach me to manage other people's creativity rather than developing my own, while communication studies would focus on marketing existing products rather than creating new ones. I would emerge from college equipped to facilitate other people's artistic visions while my own remained unexplored and undeveloped. The decision ultimately came down to choosing between security and authenticity, between following a path that guaranteed approval from my family and community versus pursuing work that engaged my deepest talents and interests despite uncertain outcomes. Standing at my bedroom window, looking out at the rows of identical houses that represented the limits of conventional ambition in Millbrook, I realized that I could not choose safety if it meant abandoning the part of myself that had discovered infinite possibility in the space between musical notes. The choice would require leaving behind more than geographical location. It meant disappointing parents who had sacrificed to provide opportunities they considered valuable, abandoning a community that had shaped my character and values, and accepting responsibility for outcomes that could not be predicted or guaranteed. But it also meant honoring the vision of possibility that had been growing inside me since I first understood music as a form of communication capable of expressing truths that conventional language could not capture. The night before my high school graduation, I sat in our basement listening to my father's radio while he worked on a furniture project that would never see completion. The same songs that had introduced me to music production played in their familiar rotation, but now they sounded like memories of the person I had been rather than previews of the person I was becoming. Tomorrow I would begin the journey toward becoming the producer I knew I could be, regardless of how many people believed such dreams were reserved for others. The Berklee College of Music acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, accompanied by financial aid documentation that transformed what should have been celebration into careful mathematical calculations about possibility versus practicality. The partial scholarship covered 60% of tuition costs, leaving a gap that represented more money than my family had ever contemplated spending on education. My parents sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by calculator printouts and loan application forms, their expressions reflecting the weight of a decision that would affect our entire household for decades. Boston felt like a different planet when I arrived for orientation weekend, carrying 2 suitcases and enough nervous energy to power the subway system that connected the campus to downtown. Students moved through the residence halls with the casual confidence of people accustomed to pursuing expensive dreams, their conversations peppered with references to private music lessons, summer programs at prestigious institutions, and family connections in the entertainment industry. I listened carefully, trying to decode the social vocabulary that would determine my ability to navigate this new environment successfully. My roommate Sarah arrived with a custom-built electric guitar, professional-grade amplification equipment, and a wardrobe that suggested comfort with the financial investment required for music education. She spoke casually about her father's work as a television composer and her mother's career as a classical violinist, describing family dinner conversations about industry trends and networking opportunities. Her background provided natural entry points into the professional world I hoped to join, while my industrial Pennsylvania origins offered no obvious advantages in creative environments. The gap between my preparation and the expectations of advanced music education became apparent during the first week of classes. Music theory courses assumed familiarity with concepts I had never encountered, despite my years of self-directed learning and experimentation. Recording technique seminars referenced equipment and software that cost more than my family's annual vacation budget. Performance classes revealed the sophisticated musical literacy that private instruction had provided my classmates, contrasting sharply with my intuitive but unconventional approach to composition and arrangement. Professor Williams, who taught the introductory audio production course, embodied the intersection of artistic vision and technical expertise that I hoped to develop. His career included work with major label artists, film soundtrack projects, and innovative electronic music collaborations that had shaped industry standards for digital recording. During our first individual consultation, he examined my portfolio of home recordings with the analytical attention typically reserved for laboratory specimens. "You possess natural instincts for sonic textures and emotional pacing," he said, listening to a piece I had composed during high school using basic software and borrowed equipment. "However, your technical execution reveals significant gaps in fundamental knowledge about signal processing, acoustic principles, and professional workflow standards. These deficiencies will limit your ability to translate creative ideas into commercially viable productions." His assessment stung because it contained accuracy I could not dispute. My recordings captured emotional authenticity and creative vision, but they lacked the polished precision that characterized professional work. The sounds in my head exceeded my technical ability to realize them properly, creating frustration that increased proportionally with my growing understanding of what sophisticated production required. I needed to acquire years of technical knowledge while simultaneously developing artistic vision that could compete with peers who had been receiving professional instruction since childhood. The financial pressure of attending Berkeley created constant awareness of the investment my family had made in my education. Every textbook purchase, equipment rental, and meal plan transaction represented sacrifices that my parents were making without complaint but with visible concern about long-term consequences. I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus bookstore, supplementing my income through tutoring younger students in basic music theory and composition fundamentals that I had mastered through necessity rather than formal instruction. Late nights in the practice rooms became my graduate school, where I spent hours after official classes learning to operate professional recording equipment through trial and error. The studios remained accessible to students until midnight, providing opportunities for extensive experimentation without competing for resources with daytime classes. I approached each piece of equipment systematically, reading manuals and testing functions until I understood not only how to operate controls but why different settings produced specific sonic results. My breakthrough came during a collaborative project in which students were assigned to produce demo recordings for local independent artists. Most teams focused on recreating established commercial sounds, attempting to match production values and stylistic conventions that would appeal to mainstream audiences. I chose to work with Maya Chen, a singer-songwriter whose introspective compositions defied easy categorization and whose modest budget prevented access to expensive studio time. Maya's songs possessed emotional depth and literary sophistication that reminded me of the transformative musical experiences from my childhood in Millbrook. Her melodies captured vulnerability and strength simultaneously, while her lyrics explored themes of identity and belonging that resonated with my own experience of feeling displaced between different worlds. However, her previous recordings had failed to capture the intimate power of her live performances, suffering from production approaches that emphasized technical perfection over emotional authenticity. Working with Maya taught me that sophisticated production did not always require expensive equipment or conventional techniques. Her voice possessed natural characteristics that responded better to vintage microphones and analog processing than to the digital precision that most students considered superior. By using older equipment and unconventional recording methods, we created sonic environments that enhanced rather than competed with her artistic vision. Our collaboration produced a 4-song EP that demonstrated how creative problem-solving could compensate for budget limitations. Instead of multi-track orchestrations that would have required extensive studio time and session musicians, we developed arrangements that used creative microphone placement and natural room acoustics to create spatial depth. Rather than polished vocal performances recorded in isolation, we captured the spontaneous interaction between voice and guitar that characterized Maya's live performances. The results exceeded our expectations and challenged conventional wisdom about the relationship between production budgets and artistic quality. Maya's EP received attention from independent labels and music supervisors who appreciated its authentic emotional impact, leading to licensing opportunities for television and film projects. More importantly for my development, the project demonstrated that my intuitive approach to production could complement formal technical training to create unique solutions for artistic challenges. Professor Williams reviewed our work with interest that bordered on surprise, acknowledging that we had achieved professional results through methods that deviated significantly from standard industry practices. Your approach reveals understanding of the emotional function of production techniques, he commented during our evaluation session. Most students focus on technical execution without considering how different choices serve the artistic vision. This project demonstrates that unconventional methods can be effective when applied with clear understanding of their intended impact. His recognition provided validation that my background in self-directed learning offered advantages that traditional education alone could not provide. While my classmates possessed superior technical knowledge and access to professional networks, my experience with resource constraints had developed creative problem-solving abilities that enabled innovative approaches to common challenges. I could hear possibilities that others missed because I had learned to work with limitations rather than assuming unlimited resources. The success of Maya's EP opened opportunities for additional collaborative projects with independent artists who valued creativity over conventional production approaches. Word spread through Boston's alternative music community that a Berklee student was producing authentic-sounding recordings at accessible prices, leading to inquiries from musicians whose artistic visions exceeded their financial resources. These projects provided practical experience that complemented my formal education while generating modest income that reduced my financial dependence on family support. However, the increasing demands of freelance production work created tension with my academic schedule and social integration at Berklee. While classmates participated in campus organizations and networking events that could provide industry connections, I spent weekends in makeshift studios helping independent artists develop their creative visions. The choice between immediate practical experience and long-term relationship building felt like a constant gamble with unclear outcomes. My social isolation at Berklee reflected deeper questions about whether I belonged in an environment designed for students whose families could afford full participation in its opportunities. Casual conversations about spring break trips to music festivals, unpaid internships at major labels, and graduate programs at prestigious institutions reminded me constantly of the economic realities that shaped different students' post-graduation possibilities. I was acquiring valuable skills and knowledge, but I remained uncertain about how to translate education into sustainable career opportunities. The revelation came during my junior year when I realized that my struggle to fit into Berklee's social environment stemmed from fundamental differences in how I understood the purpose of music education. Most students viewed college as preparation for employment within existing industry structures, focusing on developing skills and connections that would enable them to secure positions at established companies. I was more interested in creating new possibilities for independent artists who had been underserved by mainstream industry approaches. This difference in perspective became clear during a career counseling session with Dean Morrison, who reviewed my academic progress and discussed post-graduation planning. She noted my strong performance in technical courses and my growing reputation for producing high-quality independent projects, but expressed concern about my limited participation in industry networking events and traditional internship programs. "Elena, your creative abilities and work ethic are impressive," she said, reviewing my portfolio of completed projects. However, success in the music industry requires more than technical competence and artistic vision. You need professional relationships and industry credibility that come from participation in established career development pathways. Your focus on independent projects, while personally satisfying, may not provide the connections necessary for long-term career advancement. Her advice reflected conventional wisdom about music industry career development, emphasizing the importance of working within established systems to gain credibility and access to higher-level opportunities. Internships at major labels provided exposure to industry standards and potential employment prospects, while participation in campus organizations offered networking opportunities that could prove valuable throughout professional careers. My preference for independent projects, while creatively fulfilling, appeared to limit my access to traditional success pathways. But Dean Morrison's assessment failed to consider the changing landscape of music production and distribution that was creating new opportunities for independent producers and artists. Digital technologies were democratizing access to professional quality production tools, while internet platforms enabled direct relationships between creators and audiences without traditional industry intermediaries. The skills I was developing through work with independent artists positioned me to capitalize on these emerging opportunities rather than competing for limited positions within established structures. Standing at the window of Dean Morrison's office, looking out at the Boston skyline where countless ambitious young people pursued dreams that required navigation of complex professional hierarchies, I realized that my path forward would require creating opportunities rather than waiting for them to be offered. The education I was receiving at Berkeley provided valuable technical knowledge and artistic development, but my real preparation for music industry success was happening through the independent projects that demonstrated my ability to solve creative challenges with limited resources. The choice between conventional career preparation and entrepreneurial risk-taking would define not only my immediate post-graduation plans but also my long-term relationship with the music industry. I could continue pursuing internships and networking opportunities that might lead to employment at established companies, or I could build upon the foundation of independent work that had already demonstrated market demand for my creative approach to production challenges. The decision would require confidence in abilities that had not yet been validated by traditional industry measures of success, while accepting responsibility for outcomes that could not be predicted or guaranteed through conventional career planning methods. The transition from Berkeley graduate to independent music producer began in a cramped studio apartment in Somerville, Massachusetts, where I converted the bedroom closet into a makeshift vocal booth using moving blankets and foam padding purchased from a hardware store. The space measured barely 6 feet by 4 feet, but it provided the acoustic isolation necessary for recording professional quality vocals on a budget that consisted primarily of student loan money and occasional freelance income from mixing projects that other producers considered too small or unprofitable to accept. My equipment setup reflected the mathematical precision required when every purchase demanded careful consideration of cost versus capability. The audio interface, studio monitors, and microphone preamp represented months of research into professional gear that could deliver commercial quality results without the premium pricing typically associated with established brand names. I learned to identify the specific technical specifications that actually affected sound quality versus marketing features that commanded higher prices without providing proportional performance improvements. The real education began when I started accepting production projects from independent artists who possessed limited budgets but unlimited ambition to create music that could compete with major label releases. These collaborations forced me to develop creative solutions for challenges that expensive studios typically solved through equipment acquisition and established workflows. Recording drums in living rooms required understanding acoustic principles and microphone placement techniques that conservatory training rarely addressed comprehensively. Sarah Mitchell became my first serious client, a singer-songwriter from Providence whose previous recordings had failed to capture the emotional intensity of her live performances. She approached me after hearing Maya Chen's EP, seeking someone who could translate her intimate acoustic compositions into full arrangements without sacrificing the vulnerability that made her music compelling. Her budget allowed for 10 hours of studio time, requiring efficiency that would have intimidated producers accustomed to unlimited revision opportunities. Working with Sarah taught me that effective production demanded psychological insight alongside technical competence. Her songs emerged from personal experiences with depression and recovery, requiring sensitivity to emotional triggers that could disrupt creative flow during recording sessions. I learned to recognize when technical perfectionism was serving the music versus when it was creating anxiety that compromised artistic authenticity. The balance between polish and rawness became a philosophical question with practical implications for every mixing decision. Our sessions developed a rhythm that prioritized capturing emotional truth over technical perfection. Instead of recording multiple takes to eliminate every minor imperfection, we focused on performances that conveyed genuine feeling even when they contained subtle timing variations or breath sounds that conventional wisdom would have eliminated. The approach required confidence in artistic judgment that formal education had not explicitly developed, demanding trust in instincts that could not be validated through theoretical frameworks. The breakthrough occurred during our final session when Sarah performed a song about her relationship with her deceased father, while I recorded multiple microphone positions simultaneously. The performance contained a vulnerability that could not be recreated through multiple attempts, but the primary vocal microphone had captured room noise that would typically require extensive editing to remove. Instead of attempting to clean the recording, I embraced the ambient sound as part of the emotional landscape, using it to create spatial depth that enhanced rather than distracted from the intimate mood. The resulting track demonstrated how unconventional recording techniques could serve artistic vision when applied with clear understanding of their intended emotional impact. Music industry professionals who reviewed Sarah's album praised its authentic emotional resonance, with several noting that the production enhanced rather than competed with her songwriting. The recognition validated my developing philosophy that effective production required understanding the emotional function of technical choices rather than simply executing established procedures. Word of mouth within Boston's independent music community generated additional opportunities to work with artists whose creative visions exceeded their financial resources. Each project presented unique challenges that required innovative approaches to common production problems. Recording string quartets in churches demanded understanding of natural reverb and microphone positioning that differed significantly from studio environments. Capturing gospel choirs required managing multiple voices and instruments simultaneously, while maintaining clarity that allowed individual contributions to remain audible within complex arrangements. The diversity of projects accelerated my learning curve in ways that specialized focus on particular genres could not have achieved. Jazz recordings required different approaches to dynamic range and instrumental balance than rock productions demanded. Electronic music projects challenged my understanding of synthesis and sound design techniques that acoustic recordings rarely utilized. Each genre possessed conventions and expectations that needed to be understood before they could be creatively subverted or enhanced. My reputation for solving creative challenges with limited resources attracted attention from established producers who occasionally hired me for overflow work when their primary studios were fully booked. These collaborations provided exposure to professional workflows and equipment configurations that independent projects could not access, while demonstrating how expensive gear could enhance but not replace the fundamental skills of arrangement, performance coaching, and sonic decision-making that determined whether recordings achieved their artistic potential. The education I was receiving at Berklee provided valuable technical knowledge and artistic development, but my real preparation for music industry success was happening through the independent projects that demonstrated my ability to solve creative challenges with limited resources. The choice between conventional career preparation and entrepreneurial risk-taking would define not only my immediate post-graduation plans but also my long-term relationship with the music industry. I could continue pursuing internships and networking opportunities that might lead to employment at established companies, or I could build upon the foundation of independent work that had already demonstrated market demand for my creative approach to production challenges. The decision would require confidence in abilities that had not yet been validated by traditional industry measures of success, while accepting responsibility for outcomes that could not be predicted or guaranteed through conventional career planning methods. The transition from Berklee graduate to independent music producer began in a cramped studio apartment in Somerville, Massachusetts, where I converted the bedroom closet into a makeshift vocal booth using moving blankets and foam padding purchased from a hardware store. The space measured barely 6 feet by 4 feet, but it provided the acoustic isolation necessary for recording professional quality vocals on a budget that consisted primarily of student loan money and occasional freelance income from mixing projects that other producers considered too small or unprofitable to accept. My equipment setup reflected the mathematical precision required when every purchase demanded careful consideration of cost versus capability. The audio interface, studio monitors, and microphone preamp represented months of research into professional gear that could deliver commercial quality results without the premium pricing typically associated with established brand names. I learned to identify the specific technical specifications that actually affected sound quality versus marketing features that commanded higher prices without providing proportional performance improvements. The real education began when I started accepting production projects from independent artists who possessed limited budgets but unlimited ambition to create music that could compete with major label releases. These collaborations forced me to develop creative solutions for challenges that expensive studios typically solved through equipment acquisition and established workflows. Recording drums in living rooms required understanding acoustic principles and microphone placement techniques that conservatory training rarely addressed comprehensively. Sarah Mitchell became my first serious client, a singer-songwriter from Providence whose previous recordings had failed to capture the emotional intensity of her live performances. She approached me after hearing Maya Chen's EP, seeking someone who could translate her intimate acoustic compositions into full arrangements without sacrificing the vulnerability that made her music compelling. Her budget allowed for 10 hours of studio time, requiring efficiency that would have intimidated producers accustomed to unlimited revision opportunities. Working with Sarah taught me that effective production demanded psychological insight alongside technical competence. Her songs emerged from personal experiences with depression and recovery, requiring sensitivity to emotional triggers that could disrupt creative flow during recording sessions. I learned to recognize when technical perfectionism was serving the music versus when it was creating anxiety that compromised artistic authenticity. The balance between polish and rawness became a philosophical question with practical implications for every mixing decision. Our sessions developed a rhythm that prioritized capturing emotional truth over technical perfection. Instead of recording multiple takes to eliminate every minor imperfection, we focused on performances that conveyed genuine feeling even when they contained subtle timing variations or breath sounds that conventional wisdom would have eliminated. The approach required confidence in artistic judgment that formal education had not explicitly developed, demanding trust in instincts that could not be validated through theoretical frameworks. The breakthrough occurred during our final session when Sarah performed a song about her relationship with her deceased father, while I recorded multiple microphone positions simultaneously. The performance contained a vulnerability that could not be recreated through multiple attempts, but the primary vocal microphone had captured room noise that would typically require extensive editing to remove. Instead of attempting to clean the recording, I embraced the ambient sound as part of the emotional landscape, using it to create spatial depth that enhanced rather than distracted from the intimate mood. The resulting track demonstrated how unconventional recording techniques could serve artistic vision when applied with clear understanding of their intended emotional impact. Music industry professionals who reviewed Sarah's album praised its authentic emotional resonance, with several noting that the production enhanced rather than competed with her songwriting. The recognition validated my developing philosophy that effective production required understanding the emotional function of technical choices rather than simply executing established procedures. Word of mouth within Boston's independent music community generated additional opportunities to work with artists whose creative visions exceeded their financial resources. Each project presented unique challenges that required innovative approaches to common production problems. Recording string quartets in churches demanded understanding of natural reverb and microphone positioning that differed significantly from studio environments. Capturing gospel choirs required managing multiple voices and instruments simultaneously, while maintaining clarity that allowed individual contributions to remain audible within complex arrangements. The diversity of projects accelerated my learning curve in ways that specialized focus on particular genres could not have achieved. Jazz recordings required different approaches to dynamic range and instrumental balance than rock productions demanded. Electronic music projects challenged my understanding of synthesis and sound design techniques that acoustic recordings rarely utilized. Each genre possessed conventions and expectations that needed to be understood before they could be creatively subverted or enhanced. My reputation for solving creative challenges with limited resources attracted attention from established producers who occasionally hired me for overflow work when their primary studios were fully booked. These collaborations provided exposure to professional workflows and equipment configurations that independent projects could not access, while demonstrating how expensive gear could enhance but not replace the fundamental skills of arrangement, performance coaching, and sonic decision-making that determined whether recordings achieved their artistic potential. Marcus Hoffman, a veteran producer whose credits included several Grammy-nominated albums, became an informal mentor during a project that required additional engineering support for a complex orchestral recording. His approach to managing large-scale sessions revealed organizational principles that applied equally to modest independent productions, emphasizing preparation and clear communication as foundations for creative collaboration. He observed my work with interest that surprised me, eventually offering insights about industry dynamics that formal education had not addressed. "The business is changing faster than most people realize," he explained during a break between orchestra recording sessions. "Digital distribution and social media are eliminating traditional gatekeepers, creating opportunities for producers who understand how to work directly with artists rather than through label intermediaries. Your background with independent artists positions you well for these emerging market conditions, but you need to develop business skills alongside your creative abilities." His observation highlighted a gap in my preparation that technical training had not addressed comprehensively. Music production required entrepreneurial capabilities that conservatory education typically ignored, assuming that creative professionals would work within established corporate structures rather than building independent businesses. Understanding contract negotiations, project management, and client relationship development became as important as microphone techniques and mixing strategies for sustainable career development. The realization prompted me to dedicate equal attention to business education and creative skill development. I enrolled in evening courses at a local community college, studying accounting principles and marketing strategies that could apply to creative service businesses. The coursework felt foreign initially, requiring analytical thinking that differed significantly from the intuitive decision-making that musical production demanded, but gradually revealed practical applications that could enhance rather than compromise artistic integrity. Client relationship management became particularly crucial as my project load increased and repeat business began providing financial stability that reduced dependence on one-time collaborations. Artists who achieved positive results from initial recordings returned for additional projects, often bringing referrals that expanded my client base organically. Maintaining quality standards while managing increased workload required systematic approaches to project scheduling and resource allocation that successful independent businesses demanded. The learning curve intensified when I began working with artists whose ambitions extended beyond regional recognition to national and international market consideration. These projects required understanding industry standards and expectations that differed from independent music community norms, demanding technical precision and creative sophistication that could compete with major label productions. The pressure to deliver professional results with independent budgets forced continued innovation in creative problem-solving and resource management. Technology evolution provided tools that democratized access to capabilities previously available only through expensive studio facilities. Software synthesizers and digital effects processors offered sonic possibilities that hardware equivalents could not match at comparable prices, while cloud-based collaboration platforms enabled remote recording sessions that eliminated geographical constraints on artist selection. Learning to leverage these technological advantages required constant education about emerging tools and techniques that established producers often overlooked due to investment in existing equipment configurations. The combination of technical innovation and creative vision began attracting attention from music supervisors who licensed recordings for television and film projects. These opportunities provided additional revenue streams while exposing my work to broader audiences than live performance or album sales typically reached. Success in sync licensing required understanding how music functioned within narrative contexts, adapting production approaches to serve dramatic requirements rather than purely musical considerations. My first significant sync placement occurred when a track I had produced for an emerging R&B artist was selected for a popular television drama series. The licensing fee exceeded the total production budget for the original recording, demonstrating how strategic creative decisions could generate returns that multiplied initial investments substantially. More importantly, the exposure led to inquiries from other artists seeking production that could achieve similar commercial viability while maintaining artistic authenticity. The success created pressure to replicate results through formula application rather than continued creative exploration. Industry professionals began categorizing my work according to commercial patterns they recognized, encouraging focus on approaches that had proven marketable rather than experimental techniques that might not achieve immediate commercial validation. The tension between artistic growth and business sustainability required constant navigation as project opportunities increased alongside expectations for predictable results. However, the foundation of diverse experience with independent artists had developed creative flexibility that prevented formulaic thinking from constraining artistic development. Each project continued presenting unique challenges that required innovative solutions, while the business success provided resources for continued experimentation with advanced techniques and equipment upgrades that enhanced rather than replaced fundamental creative capabilities. Standing in my evolving home studio, surrounded by equipment that represented years of strategic investment and countless hours of practical experimentation, I recognized that my education in music production had extended far beyond formal institutional boundaries. The combination of academic knowledge, practical experience, and entrepreneurial necessity had created capabilities that no single educational approach could have provided, positioning me for opportunities that traditional career paths might not have revealed. The journey from recent graduate with theoretical knowledge to working producer with demonstrated market success had required constant learning and adaptation, but it had also proven that creative vision combined with business acumen could create sustainable career paths that served both artistic integrity and practical necessities. The garage behind the small colonial house we rented in Watertown became my sanctuary and laboratory, a space where the dreams that others dismissed as impractical took shape through methodical experimentation and relentless refinement. David had helped me convert the space during our first month as newlyweds, installing proper electrical outlets and acoustic treatment that transformed a storage area into a professional production facility that rivaled commercial studios, costing hundreds of dollars per hour to access. The transformation from apartment-based operation to dedicated facility marked a crucial evolution in both my technical capabilities and professional credibility. Clients no longer needed to navigate narrow stairwells or apologize for disrupting residential neighbors during recording sessions. The garage provided sufficient space for drum kits, string quartets, and small vocal ensembles, while maintaining the intimate atmosphere that had become the signature characteristic of my production style. David possessed an intuitive understanding of acoustic principles that surprised me with its sophistication, despite his background in construction rather than audio engineering. His experience with building materials and structural design informed decisions about room treatment and equipment placement that enhanced the sonic characteristics of recordings in ways that formal training had not adequately addressed. The collaboration between his practical knowledge and my creative vision produced results that exceeded what either of us could have achieved independently. Our evening work sessions developed into a rhythm that accommodated both his construction schedule and my irregular client appointments. He would arrive home exhausted from physical labor but energized by the transformation occurring in our shared space, often contributing ideas about microphone positioning or acoustic isolation that revealed his natural ear for sound quality. These conversations became some of our most intimate moments, sharing creative problem-solving that strengthened our relationship while advancing my professional development. The isolation from mainstream music industry environments forced me to develop self-reliance and creative independence that might not have emerged under different circumstances. Without access to expensive equipment rental facilities or technical support staff, every recording challenge required innovative solutions using available resources. The constraints fostered resourcefulness that became a competitive advantage when working with independent artists whose budgets demanded maximum efficiency and creative flexibility. My reputation within New England's alternative music community grew through word-of-mouth recommendations rather than industry networking or marketing campaigns. Artists discovered my work through previous clients who shared positive experiences, creating organic growth that reflected genuine satisfaction rather than promotional efforts. This grassroots development provided steady income while maintaining creative control over project selection and artistic direction. The breakthrough that established my regional credibility occurred during the production of an album for Meridian Falls, an indie rock band from Vermont whose previous recordings had failed to capture the energy of their live performances. Traditional studio approaches had emphasized separation between instruments and clinical precision that eliminated the spontaneous interaction that made their concerts compelling. My challenge was translating their collective chemistry into recorded format without sacrificing the raw excitement that attracted their devoted local following. The solution required abandoning conventional recording methodology in favor of live performance capture enhanced through strategic overdubbing and creative mixing techniques. Instead of recording instruments individually in isolated environments, we set up the entire band in the garage and captured their energy as a cohesive unit, using multiple microphones and careful acoustic treatment to maintain clarity while preserving the natural interaction between musicians. The sessions revealed the importance of psychological atmosphere in creative work. The garage environment felt comfortable and unpretentious to the band members, eliminating the performance anxiety that often accompanied expensive studio time. They could experiment freely without concern about hourly costs or technical intimidation, allowing natural creativity to emerge through extended improvisation and collaborative arrangement development. David became an unofficial member of the production team, providing technical support and creative feedback that enhanced the recording process. His construction background enabled quick solutions to acoustic challenges, while his outsider perspective on the music industry offered valuable insights about how recordings might sound to listeners without specialized knowledge. The band appreciated his honest reactions and practical suggestions, incorporating his feedback into their artistic decisions. The resulting album captured Meridian Falls at their creative peak, combining the energy of live performance with the sonic clarity that professional production could provide. Music critics praised the authentic emotional impact of the recordings, noting that the production enhanced rather than overwhelmed the band's natural chemistry. Several tracks received radio airplay on college stations throughout New England, expanding their audience beyond their regional base and generating interest from independent labels. The success of Meridian Falls attracted attention from artists throughout the Northeast who sought production that could achieve similar results. My calendar filled with projects that challenged different aspects of my developing expertise, from acoustic singer-songwriters who required intimate vocal treatments to electronic artists who pushed the boundaries of digital manipulation and sound design capabilities. Each project contributed to my education in ways that formal training could not have provided. Working with classical composers required understanding traditional orchestration principles and microphone techniques for capturing acoustic instruments in natural spaces. Collaborating with hip-hop artists demanded knowledge of sampling protocols and rhythmic programming that differed substantially from rock and folk production approaches. The diversity of genres forced continuous learning and adaptation that prevented creative stagnation. The garage studio became a gathering place for musicians who valued artistic integrity over commercial considerations, creating an informal community of independent artists who supported each other's creative development. These relationships extended beyond professional transactions to genuine friendships based on shared commitment to authentic musical expression. The network provided emotional support during challenging periods while generating collaborative opportunities that enhanced everyone's artistic growth. David's involvement in this musical community surprised both of us with its depth and significance. Despite his lack of formal musical training, he developed genuine appreciation for the creative process and formed meaningful relationships with visiting artists. His practical wisdom and emotional intelligence provided balance to conversations that might otherwise become overly intellectual or self-indulgent, keeping creative discussions grounded in reality while maintaining respect for artistic ambition. Our marriage strengthened through this shared creative endeavor, with the garage studio serving as physical manifestation of our combined dreams and efforts. The space represented more than professional facility. It symbolized our commitment to building something meaningful together, supporting each other's growth while pursuing goals that required mutual sacrifice and understanding. The isolation from mainstream industry validation created both challenges and advantages for my artistic development. Without external pressure to conform to commercial trends or established production formulas, I could explore creative approaches that might not have been approved by label executives or radio programmers. The freedom fostered innovation that distinguished my work from more conventional productions, but it also meant accepting responsibility for artistic decisions without institutional support or validation. Financial sustainability remained a constant concern that required careful balance between artistic integrity and practical necessity. The garage studio provided cost-effective production environment that enabled competitive pricing for independent artists, but the overhead expenses of equipment maintenance and facility operation created pressure to maintain consistent project flow. The business required entrepreneurial skills that music education had not addressed comprehensively, demanding attention to marketing, client relations, and financial management alongside creative responsibilities. Success with independent projects began attracting inquiries from major label artists who sought production approaches that differed from mainstream industry standards. These opportunities offered higher budgets and broader exposure, but they also threatened to compromise the intimate creative environment that had fostered my most successful work. The decisions about which projects to accept required balancing immediate financial benefits against long-term artistic development and professional reputation. The garage studio represented a unique intersection of technical capability and creative freedom that might not have been possible under different circumstances. The combination of dedicated space, supportive partnership, and artistic community created conditions that enabled both professional growth and personal fulfillment. However, the isolation from industry centers also limited access to certain types of opportunities and professional relationships that traditional career paths might have provided. Late at night, after clients had departed and equipment was powered down, I would sit in the garage surrounded by the tools and instruments that represented years of accumulated knowledge and experience. The space felt simultaneously like achievement and foundation, evidence of progress made and platform for future development. The quiet moments provided perspective on the journey from uncertain graduate to established producer, while highlighting the continued challenges of building sustainable creative career outside conventional industry structures. David would often join me during these reflective periods, sharing observations about the day's sessions and discussing plans for future projects. His presence provided emotional anchor that prevented creative work from becoming obsessive or isolating, maintaining connection to practical realities while supporting artistic ambitions. These conversations deepened our relationship while clarifying my professional direction, establishing foundations for both personal and creative growth that would prove essential during subsequent challenges and opportunities. The conference room at Atlantic Records in Manhattan possessed the intimidating grandeur designed to remind visitors of the company's position atop the music industry hierarchy. Gold and platinum albums lined the walls in perfect symmetry, their frames catching the morning light that streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. I sat across from three executives whose combined experience represented decades of commercial success, their expressions conveying the professional skepticism reserved for independent producers seeking validation from major label gatekeepers. My portfolio rested on the polished mahogany table between us, containing documentation of every significant project from the garage studio over the past 18 months. The materials included professional photographs, detailed production credits, and testimonials from artists whose careers had benefited from my unconventional recording approach. Most importantly, the presentation featured streaming statistics and radio play data that demonstrated commercial viability alongside artistic achievement. Jennifer Walsh, the senior A&R executive who had requested the meeting, reviewed my work with the analytical precision that characterized major label decision-making processes. Her background included responsibility for developing several platinum-selling artists, providing credibility that commanded respect throughout the industry. Her initial interest in my production style had emerged from hearing the Meridian Falls album, which had achieved unexpected commercial success despite its independent distribution and minimal marketing budget. "Elena, your production work demonstrates clear artistic vision and technical competence," she began, her tone maintaining the diplomatic distance that business conversations required. "The albums you have completed show understanding of contemporary production values while maintaining distinctive character that distinguishes them from mainstream releases. However, we have concerns about scalability and commercial consistency that affect our ability to offer serious partnership opportunities." The feedback reflected institutional thinking that prioritized predictable results over creative innovation, emphasizing market research and demographic targeting rather than artistic authenticity. Major labels operated according to financial models that required substantial return on investment, creating pressure to replicate successful formulas rather than exploring untested creative approaches. My reputation for producing emotionally resonant but commercially unpredictable music positioned me outside their preferred risk parameters. Michael Chen, the Vice President of Production Services, elaborated on their concerns with examples drawn from industry analytics and market performance data. His presentation revealed the sophisticated business intelligence that informed major label strategic decisions, incorporating streaming platform algorithms, radio programming preferences, and retail distribution patterns into comprehensive assessments of commercial viability. The analysis reduced artistic expression to mathematical probabilities that could be optimized through strategic, creative adjustments. Independent production approaches often struggle when transitioning to major label expectations, he explained, referencing charts that illustrated the correlation between production budgets and commercial performance across different musical genres. Artists require consistent results that can be achieved within predetermined timelines and budget parameters. Your method of extensive collaboration and creative exploration, while artistically admirable, presents scheduling and cost management challenges that our business model cannot accommodate efficiently. His assessment revealed the fundamental tension between creative authenticity and industrial efficiency that characterized mainstream music production. Major labels required predictable workflows that could process multiple artists simultaneously through standardized development pipelines, while my approach demanded individual attention and customized solutions that defied systematic replication. The conflict represented opposing philosophies about the relationship between artistic vision and commercial success. The third executive, Sarah Martinez, who oversaw marketing and distribution strategies, approached the discussion from consumer behavior perspectives that further illustrated the disconnect between independent artistry and mainstream commercial requirements. Her analysis incorporated focus group data, demographic research, and social media engagement metrics that revealed how target audiences responded to different production characteristics and promotional strategies. Market research indicates that contemporary consumers expect certain production qualities that signal professional credibility and commercial legitimacy, she stated, presenting data that correlated audio characteristics with streaming platform performance and playlist inclusion rates. Your production style, while distinctive and emotionally engaging, may not align with algorithmic preferences that determine visibility on major streaming platforms. Without platform support, even exceptional artistic content struggles to reach audiences sufficient for commercial viability. Her presentation revealed how technological intermediaries had transformed music distribution into algorithmic curation systems that favored quantifiable production characteristics over subjective artistic merit. Streaming platforms utilized automated analysis to categorize and recommend music, creating pressure for producers to optimize recordings for machine recognition rather than human emotional response. My commitment to organic creative processes conflicted with these technological requirements. The meeting concluded with polite encouragement and vague promises of future consideration that effectively communicated rejection without explicit dismissal. The executives acknowledged my artistic capabilities while explaining that partnership opportunities would require fundamental changes to my creative approach and business model. They suggested pursuing additional mainstream production credits before seeking major label collaboration, implying that my independent work lacked sufficient commercial validation. Walking through Manhattan after the meeting, surrounded by the energy of a city where artistic dreams collided daily with commercial realities, I processed the implications of their feedback. The rejection stung because it challenged core assumptions about the relationship between artistic integrity and professional success. These industry professionals possessed genuine expertise and extensive experience, lending credibility to their assessment that my approach might not translate effectively to mainstream commercial environments. However, their critique also revealed limitations inherent in institutional thinking that prioritized risk management over creative innovation. Major labels succeeded by identifying and replicating proven formulas, but this conservative approach often failed to recognize emerging trends or unconventional artistic visions that could define future market directions. Their focus on existing commercial patterns prevented appreciation for creative approaches that might expand rather than conform to current market preferences. The experience prompted deeper consideration of my professional goals and the compromises that different career paths would require. Pursuing major label validation would necessitate adapting my creative process to meet their operational requirements, potentially sacrificing the artistic authenticity that distinguished my work from conventional productions. The financial security and industry credibility that partnership could provide came with creative constraints that might undermine the qualities that made my productions distinctive. Similar patterns emerged during subsequent meetings with other industry gatekeepers who controlled access to mainstream commercial opportunities. Music supervisors for television and film projects appreciated my artistic sensibilities but questioned whether my production style matched the technical requirements for broadcast media. Radio programmers acknowledged the emotional impact of my work while explaining that playlist inclusion demanded specific audio characteristics and demographic targeting that my approach did not consistently provide. The recurring theme across these encounters was institutional resistance to creative approaches that deviated from established commercial formulas. Industry professionals operated within systems that rewarded predictable results and minimized artistic risk, creating barriers for producers whose work challenged conventional wisdom about the relationship between creativity and commercial viability. My independent success was viewed as interesting anomaly rather than viable alternative to mainstream production methods. The psychological impact of repeated rejections accumulated despite my intellectual understanding of the business factors that influenced these decisions. Each meeting reinforced messages about the limitations of independent approaches and the necessity of conforming to industry standards for serious career advancement. The consistency of feedback across different organizations suggested that my creative vision might indeed be incompatible with mainstream commercial success. David became my primary source of emotional support during this period of professional uncertainty, providing perspective that prevented rejection from undermining my confidence in the value of our work. His outsider viewpoint on the music industry offered clarity about the political and economic factors that influenced executive decision-making beyond pure artistic merit. He reminded me that institutional rejection often reflected organizational limitations rather than creative inadequacy. These people are running businesses that require predictable profits, he observed during one of our evening conversations in the garage studio. They cannot afford to take chances on approaches that might succeed brilliantly or fail completely. Your work threatens their comfort zone because it proves that different methods can achieve excellent results. That makes them question their own assumptions about what constitutes professional competence. His analysis helped me understand rejection as evidence of creative innovation rather than artistic failure. The discomfort that industry professionals expressed when encountering my work reflected their struggle to categorize approaches that challenged established hierarchies and conventional wisdom. My success with independent artists demonstrated possibilities that threatened existing power structures within the industry ecosystem. The rejection from mainstream industry gatekeepers ultimately clarified my professional direction by eliminating options that would require compromising core creative principles. Rather than continuing to seek validation from institutions that demanded conformity to their operational requirements, I could focus entirely on developing independent pathways that supported authentic artistic expression while building sustainable business models that served underrepresented creative communities. The experience transformed my understanding of professional success from external validation to internal satisfaction with meaningful work that served artists and audiences who valued authenticity over commercial manipulation. The garage studio represented more than convenient production facility. It symbolized creative independence that major label partnership would have compromised irreversibly. Standing in the garage late at night, surrounded by equipment that had captured countless hours of genuine artistic expression, I recognized that systematic rejection from industry gatekeepers had actually protected me from compromises that would have undermined everything valuable about my approach to music production. The barriers they erected had forced me to develop creative independence that no institutional partnership could provide. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by a courier service that required my signature and presented no return address or identifying information about the sender. The thick packet felt substantial in my hands as I signed the electronic device, wondering what type of correspondence would necessitate such formal delivery protocols. David had already departed for his construction site, leaving me alone in our kitchen with morning coffee and the mysterious package that would fundamentally alter my understanding of my professional struggles. Inside the envelope, I discovered a collection of photocopied documents that appeared to originate from internal communications at various music industry organizations. The papers included email threads, meeting transcripts, and strategic planning documents that referenced my work and career trajectory in contexts I had never imagined existed. The material suggested that my repeated rejections from major labels and industry gatekeepers had not resulted from purely artistic or commercial considerations as I had believed. The first document that captured my attention was an email exchange between Jennifer Walsh at Atlantic Records and Michael Stevens, a senior executive at Warner Music Group. Their correspondence, dated 3 weeks after my meeting at Atlantic, discussed my production capabilities in terms that contradicted the feedback I had received during our conference room session. Walsh described my work as innovative and commercially viable, while expressing concern about competitive implications of partnering with independent producers who challenged established industry hierarchies. Elena Castellano represents a significant threat to our current production partnerships, Walsh had written to Stevens. Her cost-effective methods and authentic artistic results could undermine the premium pricing model that supports our preferred studio relationships. If independent producers can achieve comparable quality at fraction of traditional costs, our entire production infrastructure becomes vulnerable to market disruption. The revelation struck me with the force of a physical blow, suggesting that my rejections had been motivated by economic protectionism rather than legitimate concerns about artistic or commercial viability. Major labels possessed financial relationships with expensive studios and established producers that generated substantial revenue through inflated production costs and exclusive service agreements. My success demonstrated that exceptional results could be achieved without these expensive intermediaries, threatening business models that depended on artificial scarcity and institutional gatekeeping. Additional documents revealed a broader pattern of industry coordination designed to limit opportunities for independent producers who challenged conventional cost structures. A memorandum from the National Association of Recording Professionals outlined strategies for maintaining production quality standards that effectively created barriers for non-traditional approaches to music creation. The language emphasized credential requirements and equipment specifications that favored established facilities over innovative alternatives. The most disturbing revelation emerged from transcripts of industry conference sessions where my work had been discussed as a case study in disruptive production methodologies. These conversations revealed that industry professionals recognized the superior quality and commercial potential of my approach while simultaneously developing strategies to prevent its adoption by mainstream artists. The discussions framed independent production as a threat to professional standards rather than legitimate alternative to conventional methods. One particularly damaging document was an internal report commissioned by the Recording Industry Association that analyzed the economic impact of independent production on traditional studio revenues. The study concluded that widespread adoption of garage studio methods could eliminate thousands of jobs at established facilities while reducing industry profit margins by 30%. The analysis recommended coordinated efforts to discourage artists from pursuing independent production through education campaigns about quality concerns and professional limitations. The evidence suggested that my artistic vision and business model had been perceived as existential threats to established industry power structures, explaining the consistent patterns of rejection I had encountered despite demonstrated success with independent artists. The documents revealed conversations where industry executives acknowledged my technical competence and creative innovation while developing strategies to contain my influence within limited market segments. Sarah Martinez from Atlantic Records had contributed to several email threads discussing methods for preventing independent producers from accessing mainstream distribution channels and promotional opportunities. Her messages outlined coordination between labels, radio programmers, and streaming platforms to maintain preference systems that favored productions from approved facilities. The conspiracy extended beyond individual company policies to industry-wide efforts at market manipulation. Independent producers like Castellano must remain marginalized within alternative music communities, Martinez had written in one particularly explicit email. Allowing them access to mainstream commercial opportunities would validate their methods and encourage other artists to abandon traditional production partnerships. Our revenue models cannot sustain this type of systematic disruption. The documentation painted a picture of deliberate economic sabotage disguised as professional standards enforcement. Industry organizations had coordinated to limit my opportunities not because my work lacked quality or commercial potential, but because my success threatened the financial relationships that sustained their existing business models. The rejections I had interpreted as artistic failures were actually evidence of competitive threats that required strategic suppression. My hands trembled as I processed the implications of these revelations. Every meeting where I had been told my approach was inadequate for professional consideration had been theater designed to discourage continued independent production. The feedback about technical limitations and commercial concerns had been fabricated to protect industry profits rather than provide legitimate artistic guidance. The systematic nature of the rejection suggested coordination that extended far beyond individual company preferences. The psychological impact of learning about deliberate sabotage was more devastating than any artistic criticism could have been. I had internalized messages about my professional inadequacy and questioned my creative judgment based on feedback that was intentionally misleading. The self-doubt and creative uncertainty that had plagued me following industry rejections had been manufactured through systematic deception designed to protect established commercial interests. David found me still sitting at the kitchen table when he returned from work that evening, surrounded by the scattered documents that had occupied my attention for the entire day. His expression shifted from casual greeting to deep concern as he recognized the emotional impact of whatever I had discovered. I handed him the most explicit email exchanges without explanation, watching his face transform as he absorbed the implications of the corporate conspiracy that had been targeting our work. "This explains everything," he said quietly, setting down the papers with careful deliberation. "Every rejection, every criticism about your methods, every suggestion that you needed to conform to industry standards. They were not trying to help you improve. They were trying to eliminate competition that threatened their profit margins." His analysis confirmed my own interpretation while providing emotional support that prevented the revelations from overwhelming my capacity to respond constructively. The anger that had been building throughout the day focused into determination to expose the systematic deception that had affected not only my career but potentially countless other independent producers whose work threatened established industry hierarchies. The documents included contact information for the anonymous source who had compiled the evidence, identified only as a friend in the industry, with instructions for secure communication protocols. The mystery correspondent had obviously possessed access to confidential communications across multiple organizations, suggesting either high-level industry position or sophisticated intelligence-gathering capabilities. Their motivation for exposing the conspiracy remained unclear, but their documentation was comprehensive enough to support serious legal action. My first instinct was to contact journalists who specialized in music industry coverage, providing evidence of anti-competitive practices that violated both ethical standards and potentially federal regulations governing market manipulation. The scandal could generate publicity that would validate my approach while exposing the corrupt practices that had limited opportunities for innovative producers throughout the industry. However, David counseled strategic patience, arguing that immediate public disclosure might trigger legal retaliation from powerful organizations with extensive resources for litigation and reputation management. He suggested consulting with attorneys who specialized in competition law to understand our legal options while developing strategies that would maximize impact while minimizing personal risk. The evening was spent researching precedents for similar cases involving anti-competitive practices in creative industries. We discovered that musicians and independent producers had successfully challenged record label cartels in previous decades, resulting in court decisions that established important protections for artistic entrepreneurship. The legal framework existed to support action against the conspiracy we had uncovered. More importantly, the documents provided clarity about my professional direction that eliminated uncertainty about pursuing mainstream industry validation. The evidence proved that my independent approach was not only viable but threatening enough to established interests to warrant coordinated suppression efforts. The systematic rejection had been evidence of success rather than failure, confirmation that my methods represented genuine innovation rather than naive experimentation. The revelations transformed my understanding of the music industry from creative meritocracy to economic oligarchy that protected established commercial relationships through manipulation and deception. The discovery was painful but liberating, providing truth that enabled strategic decision-making based on actual market conditions rather than manufactured feedback designed to discourage competition. Late that night, as David and I organized the documents for secure storage and legal consultation, I realized that the anonymous source had provided more than evidence of corporate misconduct. They had given me the knowledge necessary to navigate industry politics with realistic expectations while maintaining commitment to authentic creative work that served artists and audiences rather than institutional profit margins. The truth was disturbing but empowering, revealing that my struggles had resulted from systematic oppression rather than personal inadequacy, while demonstrating that my independent success represented genuine threats to established power structures that required protection through coordinated suppression efforts. The decision to continue operating independently despite industry pressure carried consequences that extended far beyond professional considerations into every aspect of our personal and financial stability. The revelation about coordinated industry opposition had clarified the challenges we faced, but it had also intensified the isolation from mainstream opportunities that might have provided easier pathways to economic security and social acceptance within our community. Our monthly budget required constant vigilance and creative solutions to maintain the garage studio while supporting a growing family. David's construction income provided steady foundation support, but the seasonal variations in building projects created periods of uncertainty that coincided with slower months for independent music production. The combination of irregular income streams demanded financial planning strategies that more conventional career paths did not require. The equipment needs of professional music production created ongoing pressure for capital investment that competed with household necessities and future planning considerations. Each technological advancement in recording capabilities required evaluation of whether upgrade costs could be justified through projected client work, while delayed investment decisions risked obsolescence that could compromise competitive positioning within the independent music market. The garage studio consumed resources that conventional families might allocate toward home improvements, vacation travel, or educational savings for children. The opportunity costs became particularly apparent when comparing our lifestyle to David's colleagues in construction, who pursued recreational activities and consumer purchases that our creative priorities rendered impractical. The contrast generated occasional tension about resource allocation and long-term financial planning. Social isolation within our suburban community reflected broader cultural attitudes about appropriate career choices for married couples with children. Neighbors possessed conventional understanding of professional success that emphasized stable employment with predictable advancement opportunities, viewing creative entrepreneurship as risky indulgence rather than legitimate career strategy. Their well-intentioned concerns about our unconventional choices created persistent undercurrent of judgment that affected social relationships. Family gatherings with David's relatives became exercises in diplomatic deflection as his parents and siblings expressed increasing concern about our financial choices and their implications for Marcus's future security. The monthly dinners that had once provided comfortable social connection transformed into opportunities for relatives to offer advice about pursuing more practical career options that would ensure adequate healthcare coverage and retirement planning. Patricia Morrison, David's mother, possessed particularly strong opinions about appropriate gender roles and parental responsibilities that my career choices appeared to violate. Her generation had constructed clear boundaries between creative hobbies and serious career commitments, viewing my professional music production work as expensive distraction from proper domestic priorities. Her criticism carried additional weight because of her genuine love for Marcus and legitimate concern for his welfare. "Elena, I understand that music provides personal satisfaction," Patricia explained during one particularly direct conversation following Sunday dinner. "However, Marcus requires parents who prioritize his stability and future opportunities over personal artistic fulfillment. Your late nights in the garage and irregular income create uncertainty that could affect his academic performance and social development." Her assessment reflected conventional wisdom about child-rearing that emphasized predictable routines and financial security as foundations for successful family life. The criticism stung because it challenged my commitment to both artistic integrity and maternal responsibility, suggesting that pursuing creative work necessarily compromised parental effectiveness. The implication that I was selfish for maintaining professional ambitions beyond traditional domestic roles triggered defensive responses that strained family relationships. David defended our choices with unwavering support that sometimes placed him in difficult positions between his family's concerns and his commitment to our shared vision. His parents viewed his endorsement of my music career as evidence of poor judgment about practical priorities, questioning whether his loyalty to me was preventing realistic assessment of our financial situation. The family tensions affected him more deeply than he typically acknowledged, creating stress that influenced his own job performance and emotional well-being. The impact on Marcus required constant monitoring to ensure that our unconventional family structure provided adequate stability despite the creative chaos that surrounded him. His classmates lived in households where parents pursued conventional careers with predictable schedules and clear professional identities that were easily explained during school presentations and social interactions. His attempts to describe my work as a music producer often generated confusion or skepticism from teachers and other parents. The challenge intensified when Marcus expressed interest in music lessons and creative activities that required financial investment during periods when production income was insufficient to cover additional expenses. The decision-making process about which opportunities to provide created guilt about potentially limiting his development due to our career choices, while also demonstrating the practical consequences of pursuing artistic independence. Health insurance coverage represented an ongoing concern that conventional employment would have resolved through employer-provided benefits. As independent contractors, we navigated insurance markets that offered expensive policies with limited coverage, creating constant awareness of medical expenses that could devastate our careful financial planning. The anxiety about potential health emergencies affected decision-making about everything from equipment purchases to vacation planning. The professional isolation from mainstream industry networks limited access to certain types of collaborative opportunities and career advancement possibilities that traditional employment might have provided. While independent production work offered creative fulfillment and direct relationships with artists, it also meant foregoing the mentorship opportunities and professional development resources that major label positions could have offered. The decision to decline several offers for staff positions at recording studios reflected our commitment to independent creative control despite the financial security that steady employment would have provided. These opportunities required relocating to urban centers with higher costs of living, while accepting creative limitations that would have constrained the artistic innovation that distinguished our work. The trade-offs between security and authenticity required constant re-evaluation as circumstances changed. The emotional costs of pursuing unconventional career paths while managing family responsibilities created stress that affected our marriage despite our shared commitment to the creative vision. The constant pressure to justify our choices to skeptical relatives and concerned friends generated defensive reactions that sometimes spilled over into private conversations about our goals and strategies. The need to present united front to external criticism occasionally prevented honest discussion about doubts and concerns that needed addressing. David's unwavering support provided crucial emotional foundation during periods when industry rejection and family pressure threatened to undermine my confidence in our chosen path. His ability to maintain perspective about long-term goals while managing immediate practical challenges demonstrated partnership strength that enabled continued pursuit of creative independence despite mounting obstacles. His construction background provided practical wisdom about building sustainable foundations that applied equally to creative enterprises and family stability. The revelation about industry conspiracy had actually intensified the emotional costs of authenticity by confirming that our struggles resulted from systematic opposition rather than market-based evaluation of our work quality. While the knowledge provided clarity about strategic challenges, it also highlighted the extent of resistance we faced from established interests that possessed significant resources for maintaining competitive barriers. The decision to document our experience through detailed record-keeping reflected growing awareness that our journey might serve broader purposes beyond personal career development. The systematic nature of industry opposition suggested that other independent producers faced similar challenges, creating potential for collective action that could address the competitive manipulation we had discovered. The possibility of contributing to industry reform added meaningful dimension to personal sacrifices that authenticity required. Late evening conversations in the garage studio provided opportunities for honest assessment of the costs and benefits of our unconventional choices. Surrounded by equipment that represented years of investment and creative development, we could evaluate whether the independence we had achieved justified the security we had foregone. The financial uncertainty remained challenging, but the creative fulfillment and artistic integrity we maintained provided satisfaction that conventional employment might not have offered. The recognition that authenticity required ongoing sacrifice rather than single dramatic decision helped maintain realistic expectations about future challenges while reinforcing commitment to values that had guided our choices. The costs of creative independence were substantial and ongoing, but they enabled work that served artistic vision rather than compromising authentic expression for institutional approval. The trade-offs remained difficult but sustainable because they aligned with fundamental beliefs about the relationship between meaningful work and personal fulfillment. The phone call that changed everything arrived on a Wednesday morning in February, while Marcus was eating breakfast and David was reviewing blueprints for a commercial renovation project. The caller identified himself as Thomas Richardson from Paramount Pictures, explaining that he was a music supervisor responsible for selecting songs and composers for major film productions. His voice carried the casual authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that could transform careers overnight. Ms. Castellano, I have been following your production work through several independent artists whose music has crossed my desk, he began, his tone suggesting genuine professional interest rather than perfunctory courtesy. Specifically, I was impressed by the emotional authenticity in your production of Sarah Mitchell's album and the innovative acoustic approach you used for the Meridian Falls recordings. We have a project that might benefit from your distinctive style. The opportunity he described involved creating the musical score for an independent film that had gained significant attention during festival screenings and was now being prepared for theatrical release. The director had specifically requested production approaches that would enhance emotional storytelling rather than overwhelming narrative development with conventional orchestral arrangements. Richardson believed my track record with intimate, character-driven recordings positioned me perfectly for the project requirements. The film, titled Between the Lines, explored themes of family reconciliation and artistic authenticity that resonated powerfully with my own experience navigating creative independence while maintaining personal relationships. The story followed a middle-aged woman who discovers hidden letters revealing family secrets that recontextualize her understanding of past conflicts and future possibilities. The emotional complexity required musical treatment that could support subtle dramatic development without telegraphing narrative conclusions. Richardson explained that the production budget allowed for creative freedom that major studio projects rarely provided, while offering compensation that exceeded anything I had earned through independent album production. More significantly, the project would provide film industry credentials that could open opportunities for additional scoring work and mainstream music production collaborations. The potential career advancement represented validation that had been systematically denied through traditional industry channels. The initial meeting with director Amanda Foster took place at her editing facility in Cambridge, where she had assembled rough cuts of key scenes that demonstrated the musical requirements. Foster possessed artistic vision that aligned perfectly with my production philosophy, emphasizing emotional authenticity over technical showmanship while maintaining professional standards that would satisfy theatrical distribution requirements. Elena, I chose to contact you specifically because your work captures genuine human emotion without manipulation or sentimentality, Foster explained as we reviewed scenes that would require musical support. This film demands honesty that mainstream composers often struggle to provide because their training emphasizes dramatic effect over subtle character development. Your background with independent artists suggests you understand how music can serve story rather than competing with it. Her assessment reflected understanding of my creative approach that major label executives had either missed or deliberately ignored. The recognition that my unconventional methods represented advantages rather than limitations provided validation that had been absent from previous professional interactions. Foster viewed my independence from mainstream industry conventions as qualification rather than impediment for the artistic challenges her project presented. The scoring process revealed how skills developed through independent music production translated effectively to film composition requirements. The intimate recording techniques I had perfected for singer-songwriter albums proved ideal for creating musical textures that supported emotional storytelling without overwhelming dialogue or visual elements. The creative problem-solving abilities that resource constraints had fostered enabled innovative approaches to common scoring challenges. Working within Foster's editorial timeline required efficiency that my garage studio experience had prepared me to handle effectively. The deadline pressure that might have intimidated producers accustomed to unlimited revision opportunities felt manageable because independent projects had taught me to capture essential emotional content quickly while maintaining quality standards. The skills that industry critics had dismissed as unprofessional proved essential for meeting professional film production requirements. The collaboration with Foster developed into creative partnership that extended beyond technical music production to artistic consultation about narrative development and character motivation. Her respect for my insights about emotional storytelling reflected recognition of expertise that formal film scoring education might not have provided. The interdisciplinary nature of our work validated my intuitive understanding of how music functions within larger artistic contexts. The breakthrough moment occurred during a scoring session for the film's climactic scene, where the protagonist discovers letters that reveal her father's true feelings about her artistic ambitions. The emotional parallel to my own experience with family expectations and creative validation enabled me to compose music that captured the complex mixture of grief, vindication, and hope that the scene required. Foster's reaction confirmed that personal authenticity enhanced rather than compromised professional effectiveness. "This is exactly what the scene needed," she said after listening to the initial composition. You understood the emotional complexity without my having to explain it because you have lived similar experiences. That authenticity translates into music that serves the story rather than imposing external interpretation on the narrative. The completion of Between the Lines generated industry attention that exceeded both Foster's and Richardson's expectations. The film's premiere at the Boston Independent Film Festival received critical acclaim that specifically praised the musical score for its contribution to emotional storytelling. Music industry publications reviewed the soundtrack as demonstration of how independent production approaches could enhance rather than compromise professional film work. The success attracted immediate inquiries from other filmmakers seeking scoring services that could provide similar emotional authenticity within budget constraints that major composers might not accept. The film industry's project-based structure aligned perfectly with my independent business model, offering opportunities for creative collaboration without requiring exclusive commitments that might limit artistic freedom. More significantly, the film's scoring success provided credibility that began opening previously closed doors within the music industry. Record label executives who had dismissed my work as commercially inadequate began requesting meetings to discuss potential collaborations. The external validation from film industry professionals carried weight that independent music success alone had not commanded within traditional music business hierarchies. The financial impact of the film scoring work exceeded the compensation for my previous year of independent music production, demonstrating how expanding into adjacent creative industries could provide economic sustainability that music production alone might not achieve. The success validated David's long-standing argument that my creative skills possessed broader applications than traditional music industry career paths recognized. The recognition also affected my relationship with Marcus, who had observed the stress and uncertainty that characterized my independent music career while struggling to explain my work to classmates and teachers. The film premiere provided concrete evidence of professional achievement that he could share proudly, while demonstrating that unconventional career paths could generate both artistic satisfaction and social recognition. David's pride in the accomplishment reflected understanding of how the breakthrough represented validation for our shared sacrifices and strategic decisions. The success confirmed that maintaining independence from corrupted industry systems had been correct choice, while proving that authentic creative work could find appropriate outlets despite systematic barriers designed to limit opportunities. The evening after the film premiere, we sat in the garage studio surrounded by equipment that had enabled the journey from rejected demos to acclaimed film score. The space looked unchanged, but its significance had evolved from sanctuary for dismissed dreams to foundation for recognized professional achievement. The breakthrough represented culmination of years of development while simultaneously opening possibilities that had not previously existed. Richardson called the following week with additional project offers that could establish film scoring as sustainable supplement to independent music production. The opportunities represented validation that had been systematically denied through traditional music industry channels, while providing economic foundation that could support continued creative independence and family stability. The breakthrough moment had arrived not through conformity to industry expectations or compromise of artistic vision, but through authentic expression of creative capabilities that had been developed through independent exploration and collaborative experimentation. The success proved that alternative pathways to professional recognition existed for producers willing to build expertise outside conventional institutional frameworks. Standing at the threshold of expanded opportunities, I recognized that the breakthrough represented beginning rather than conclusion of creative development. The film industry success provided platform for advancing artistic vision while maintaining independence from systems that had attempted to suppress innovative approaches to music production. The validation enabled continued growth without requiring surrender of authentic creative principles that had distinguished my work from conventional commercial productions. The success of Between the Lines created immediate opportunities that required strategic decision-making about which projects would best serve long-term career development while maintaining the creative integrity that had distinguished my work from mainstream commercial productions. The phone began ringing daily with inquiries from filmmakers, record labels, and independent artists who sought production services that could deliver the emotional authenticity that had garnered critical acclaim for the film score. Thomas Richardson became my de facto agent within the film industry, leveraging his extensive network of directors and producers to identify projects that matched my creative capabilities with appropriate budgets and artistic freedom. His enthusiasm for my work reflected genuine appreciation for production approaches that served narrative requirements rather than pursuing technical showmanship that might overshadow storytelling effectiveness. The partnership provided access to opportunities that individual networking efforts could not have achieved. The second film scoring project arrived through Richardson's recommendation to director Carlos Mendez, whose documentary about immigrant musicians in Los Angeles required musical treatment that could capture cultural authenticity while appealing to mainstream American audiences. The challenge demanded understanding of musical traditions from multiple countries, while creating cohesive sonic environments that supported documentary storytelling without appropriating or misrepresenting cultural expressions. Mendez had reviewed my independent music production work alongside the Between the Lines score, recognizing that my background with diverse artists had developed sensitivity to cultural nuances that formal film scoring education might not address comprehensively. His project required a producer who could collaborate respectfully with traditional musicians while translating their authentic expressions into contemporary production contexts that would resonate with documentary audiences. The documentary work introduced me to recording techniques and cultural considerations that expanded my capabilities beyond traditional Western musical approaches. Collaborating with mariachi ensembles required understanding traditional instrumentation and arrangement principles that differed significantly from rock and folk production methods I had mastered previously. The learning curve was steep but rewarding, adding dimensions to my technical expertise while deepening appreciation for musical diversity. The project also demonstrated how my garage studio setup could accommodate diverse recording requirements through creative adaptation rather than expensive equipment acquisition. Traditional mariachi music possessed acoustic characteristics that responded well to the intimate recording environment I had developed, while the flexible microphone arrangements enabled capture of ensemble interactions that larger commercial studios might struggle to achieve within comparable budget constraints. Working with immigrant musicians provided insights into cultural dynamics that affected recording sessions in ways that technical training had not anticipated. Language barriers required patience and creative communication strategies, while cultural attitudes toward authority and artistic collaboration influenced how direction and feedback could be effectively delivered. The experience taught valuable lessons about inclusive production practices that served diverse artistic communities. The documentary's completion generated industry recognition that extended beyond film scoring into broader music production opportunities. Music industry publications featured articles about my cross-cultural production work, emphasizing how independent studio approaches could achieve results that expensive commercial facilities often failed to deliver. The coverage attracted attention from record labels seeking producers who could work effectively with diverse artists within modest budget parameters. Atlantic Records, which had previously rejected my work as commercially inadequate, contacted me through their new artists development department with inquiries about producing debut albums for emerging multicultural artists. The irony of their renewed interest was not lost on me, but the opportunity represented access to resources and distribution networks that could significantly expand the reach of my production work while maintaining creative control over artistic decisions. The meeting with Jennifer Walsh, the same executive who had dismissed my capabilities during my initial presentation, required careful navigation of professional diplomacy while asserting creative authority that had been validated through independent success. Her acknowledgement of my evolved production capabilities suggested institutional recognition of achievements that had been accomplished outside their preferred development pathways. Elena, your recent film work demonstrates production sophistication that addresses our previous concerns about commercial viability, Walsh explained during our conference room discussion. We are particularly interested in your ability to work with artists from diverse cultural backgrounds while maintaining production quality that appeals to mainstream audiences. This combination represents exactly what our Emerging Artists program requires. Her assessment revealed how industry perspectives had shifted in response to external validation rather than objective evaluation of my artistic capabilities. The film scoring success had provided credibility that my independent music work alone could not command within traditional music industry hierarchies, despite demonstrated quality and commercial potential that had existed throughout my career development. The record label opportunities required careful evaluation of contracts and creative control provisions that could protect artistic integrity while accessing mainstream distribution channels. David's business instincts proved invaluable during negotiations, identifying potential compromise areas that might constrain future creative decisions while ensuring fair compensation for production services that had proven their market value through independent success. The decision to accept selective major label projects while maintaining independent studio operations represented strategic balance between commercial expansion and creative autonomy. The arrangement enabled access to larger budgets and broader audiences without surrendering ownership of production methods or artistic vision that had distinguished my work from conventional commercial approaches. The increased project volume required systematic expansion of studio capabilities and workflow efficiency that could accommodate multiple concurrent productions without compromising quality standards. David contributed construction expertise to garage renovations that doubled recording capacity while maintaining acoustic characteristics that had proven effective for intimate production approaches. The equipment investments represented calculated risks that future income could justify, but the immediate financial pressure required careful cash flow management during the transition period. The combination of film scoring income and emerging record label projects provided foundation for sustainable expansion, while independent artist work continued generating steady revenue that supported operational expenses. Marcus observed these developments with growing understanding of how creative persistence could eventually generate both artistic satisfaction and practical success. His presence during studio sessions provided motivation for maintaining family-centered priorities despite increased professional demands, while his questions about the work demonstrated genuine interest in creative processes that had shaped our household environment. The recognition from film and music industries created social validation within our community that had been absent during earlier periods of professional uncertainty. Neighbors who had previously viewed my garage studio work with skepticism began expressing interest in the artistic achievements that had gained media attention. The external recognition affected family dynamics by reducing pressure from relatives who had questioned our unconventional career choices. Patricia Morrison's acknowledgement of my professional success represented significant shift in family relationships that had been strained by concerns about financial security and social respectability. Her admission that she had underestimated the potential of creative careers suggested broader recognition that alternative pathways to success could achieve both artistic fulfillment and practical stability. The momentum created by film scoring success enabled strategic planning for long-term career development that could serve multiple creative interests while building sustainable business operations. The combination of independent artist work, film projects, and selective major label collaborations provided diversified income streams that reduced dependence on any single industry sector while maintaining creative freedom. The garage studio had evolved from makeshift recording space to professional facility that attracted national attention for innovative production approaches. The physical transformation reflected creative development that had progressed from experimental hobbyist work to recognized expertise that commanded industry respect and competitive compensation. Standing in the expanded studio space, surrounded by equipment that represented years of strategic investment and creative development, I recognized that the momentum generated by breakthrough success required continued innovation and artistic growth to sustain long-term career advancement. The opportunities created by external validation provided platform for exploring new creative territories while maintaining commitment to authentic artistic expression that had distinguished my work from conventional commercial productions. The success had proven that alternative pathways to professional recognition existed for creative professionals willing to develop expertise outside established institutional frameworks while maintaining commitment to authentic artistic vision that served meaningful purposes rather than purely commercial considerations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.